Yes, I have the silly hat on because I recently joined the membership committee. I like to join any organization that will have me as a member. There's not many of them. It's pretty much the ransomware group and the membership committee. But genuinely, if you see people wearing these hats and you're not a member at first, or you need to learn more about things in membership, come and speak to us with the silly hats. I'll take it off. It's good. I could do the whole talk like this, but I know that all of you, well, some of you, I recognize some of you from last night. You were at a social function. Is it true? Yeah. I was not there. I never go to social functions. I don't dance. I don't drink. And I'm definitely not hungover. So like the rest of you, I'll try and keep this light and easy and kind of fun. So this quote comes from George Box. Are there any like catastrophe modeler people in the room? No? Unlikely. Sometimes at certain conferences, they collect together like a bunch of nerds and like the whole room raises their hand. But not here, I think. I think most of you are incident responders, which is good. That's how I grew up too. And it's really a pleasure to be here to present this to you because it's like the work that I do in the cyber insurance industry that's nothing like the work that I do in incident response. And so it's kind of nice to bring things from one community to another, and I hope you'll indulge me a little bit with this stuff. So first off, I have to say thank you. This model and this presentation wouldn't be possible without some of my friends, right? These are the people that help us think about ransomware and do stuff. This particular picture is taken from last year in Japan when one of my best friends, Eurovision, as we call him, that's his nickname, Eurovision, he had like his brain explode when he met the other gentleman, Alexander, Keynote Delanoy. And you can ask us why we call each other these stupid nicknames some other time. But there was this great moment where they saw each other and like, you know, Alexander answered Eurovision's question and his head exploded. So this is what happens at first. We get together and we learn stuff and we think differently. So they say that you should never put any equations into a presentation, and especially the night or the morning after the social function. So I'm going to put 5 equations on the screen because I like to break the rules. You know, I used to be a pen tester, bit of a hacker, you know, it's got that mindset. But I'm putting this in here to get you warmed up, to give you the idea, right? It's not a super complicated slide, so don't worry. The basic idea here is 5% chance of $1 million loss is 50,000. We don't even care what the units are. They could be euros, they could be drachma, they could be, you know, dinar. It doesn't matter, right? The point is just to get the idea. 5% chance of $1 million or million loss, 50,000. 0.25 or 2.5% chance of a 2 million, 50,000. A 1% chance of a 5 million, 50,000. A 1 in 1,000 chance of a 500 million impact is 50,000. Now, why am I doing this? Like, I'm trying to get across the idea of frequency and severity because we're going to talk a lot about it through the rest of this. This is a talk about models. As I was trying to say earlier, the quote on the beginning of the screen comes from George Box. Well, maybe not the exact quote, but it's basically a famous quote where he said, all models are wrong, but some models are useful. And that's what I aim to be, is useful. Sometimes a little bit funny and useful. Okay, so I know we believe in being binary in this engineering profession of ours. We think things are either true or they're false. You know, there's nothing in between, right, in engineering. But we're going to get a little bit NB today, and we're going to say, like, in my world, it's not true or false. It's probabilistic. So there's like a 65% chance of this or a 35% chance of this. The other thing that I hate is averages. Does anyone hate averages? Anyone with me? Yeah? Okay. Averages are like super annoying, right? You know, first of all, there's 4 kinds of them, and most people only focus on one. You know, there's also the geometric mean or the harmonic mean, but they just sound mean. I don't like mean people. So you've also got the median. The median's vaguely useful sometimes. But the basic idea I want to get across is like people talk about the average ransom being whatever number. It doesn't really matter what number it is. They say, you know, 500,000, 800,000, whatever. It depends on your sample set. And those averages are rarely as useful as the range, right? So every point estimate in a discussion in a modeling world is actually a range of values. And so that's what I'm trying to show you up above. So we might say that 50,000 is the average of the things I just showed you, but it's actually a range. And so I need to know what the top and the bottom of that range is as well. So any Eurovision Underground fans in the room? Just checking. Except for you. You're not allowed to. Okay. All right. So I wrote an entire academic paper about how much I hate averages in ransomware. Cambridge is a small town. There's not much to do in the evening, so I spent a year or two gathering ransoms as part of the MSR SIG. And the really simple idea, I like to condense my research into the ridiculous elevator pitch. I think there's something good about doing something serious and then making fun of it, right? So what's wrong with averages? Well, as an example, let's say we take my salary and we take your salaries, and we average our salaries, maybe it says something about our salaries, okay? But if I invite Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk to our club, and then we average our salaries, it no longer says anything about our salaries or their salaries, because it's like somewhere in the middle of some crazy numbers, right? That's the point I'm trying to make in this paper, is that the averages of these extreme ransoms that you see are completely different than the small ransoms that you see. And if you look at the kind of amount of ransoms, and most of them, in fact, 96% of ransoms are below average. Does that make sense? Or does it sound like I'm hungover? No one wants to do math. You're like, I came for incident response and you're doing equations already. Okay, seriously, 96% of the ransoms that I've seen, and we have a sample set of 200,000 ransoms paid, right? 96% of them are below the average because we're dealing with extreme distributions. So how do we solve this? Like, how do we understand the economic loss of ransomware? And later I'll talk about why we'd want to do that, because I like to do something first and then tell you why afterwards. Ask for forgiveness later, right? It's easier to get forgiveness than permission. So how do we do this? How do we kind of play with these numbers? Instead of just multiplying the chance of ransomware times the average, which is a terrible thing to do, we use Monte Carlo, right? So anyone been to Monte Carlo? Yeah. Good, cool. All right, so how does a Monte Carlo simulation work? We've got, point one, define a kind of decision tree. I'm doing a very vague general idea of Monte Carlo in case you've never seen it before. You have a decision tree, you have some probabilities that different parts of it will occur. So for example, in the context of ransomware, I might say, what's the chance the ransomware happens? What's the chance that given it's happened, it actually impacts you? What's the chance you engage external incident response? What's the cost of the incident? Well, do you pay the ransom? Do you not pay the ransom? How much damage was done? Which gang were you hit by? All of these things could be part of the Monte Carlo engine, right? And then you have to acknowledge and encode any uncertainty that you have in these numbers, so that range of values. And if you have a bunch of these ranges of values, then you can kind of simulate this stuff. You can randomize a lot of paths through the decision tree, and you can add it all up, and you can get some answers. So that's basically what I'm talking about for the rest of the presentation. You can go home if you're already bored or you're freaked out by Monte Carlo, because this is the general idea of the entire talk. So the mature stuff, I have to talk about this stuff really quickly to get us on point. Ground up loss. So the ground up loss is the total economic loss. I'm in insurance, so I'm modeling for insurance purposes, but we have to differentiate between the insurance loss and the ground up loss. So most of you will only be interested in the ground up loss, and that's fine. That's like what it costs to an institution when they have a ransomware incident. Then I care about the insured loss, and the insured loss is capped by both the copay, or the excess, or the deductible, but also the limit. So if you only bought 5 million worth of insurance, then my maximum loss can only be 5 million. And I know a lot of you get annoyed that insurance doesn't pay for everything, but it's by design, and we shouldn't, right? If we paid for everything, you might behave badly, and then we would suffer the loss. It's a perverse incentive. And I like a bit of perversity, but not in my incentives. So annualized average loss. Thank you. That's good. It's good to be here. Annualized average loss is how we look at things. Like imagine you have a ransomware event 1 year and you don't have any for 5 years. What is the average amount you should be spending on risk for the years that something doesn't occur? So we talk about annualized average loss. We also talk about return periods. So you might hear people say something like, this is a 1 in 200 event. This is a 1 in 100 event. This is a 1 in 1,000 event. And that's very useful That's probabilistic thinking, getting away from this whole binary universe. Then we have these like annual exceedance probabilities, which is the reverse of the return period. So I might say to you something's a 1 in 50 return period, and you might say, oh, that's a 2% chance, Aaron, because I'm paying attention, right? And those things are interchangeable and very useful as a concept. And then we have exceedance curves. So I'm going to show you some exceedance curves in a minute. And if you get all of this right and you analyze and average and understand the results, then you can drink an espresso macchiato and ride around on a scooter. Okay. All right, catastrophe models, right? I hope they're a little bit new to this audience, but they're not new to me. They emerged in the 1980s as a way to quantify the potential losses from things like earthquakes or hurricanes or political violence, terrorism, whatever. Like you can model any of these things. And I spent a lot of time at the Center for Risk Studies in Cambridge. I was lucky to study with a lot of other people who understood risk better than I did. I was just an incident responder and hacker trying to learn how to do math, or maths, as they say in England, and really enjoying it, right? So now it's being extended to cyber disasters, okay? So we're starting to talk, there are some models for cyber generally. I kind of hate that, but no disrespect to the companies. There's like RMS, AIR, CyberCube, Cover. I think there's a few different companies building these like cyber insurance economics mathematical models, but a lot of them are for like cyber in the big, right? Like they just do cyber. They don't do ransomware, phishing, DDoS. And I think all of these things, all of these harms or perils, as they might say, they have different loss functions. And so we should think of it in different ways. So what is the output of this modeling? It's a result and a probability, as I said. 1 in 200 chance of a $50 million loss, average annual loss of 2 million. Okay, so catastrophe models are focused on the tail risk, like the most extreme results. So like what is the worst hurricane we could have? What is the worst earthquake we could have? But we also want to talk about other types of models. We want to talk about attrition models. So I promised you that I would give you some exceedance curves. Nothing exceeds like excess, as someone said in the bar last night. And so this is an exceedance curve. So you see up there basically something like 40%, or let's say even 30% of all ransoms are less than $10,000, okay? So the stuff you see in the press is like this little tail at the end. You know, the largest ransom I'm aware of is $75 million. This exceedance curve encodes that information to say, what is the chance of paying a ransom of this amount compared to that amount? Now, actually, I'm not really that interested in ransoms. I'm interested in the total economic loss. And wonderfully, the insurance industry published these ransom loss ratios. So like when they pay the ransom is this much, and the loss is that much. And so you can use this to build an economic model that I am now presenting to you, right? So this is up to $2 billion in revenue, and you can see those different loss ratios in different years, so on. So the graph on the left is ransoms, and the graph on the right is total economic loss for these different things. Okay. You can also scale this up for the entire market. You can say like, how much will the insurance industry as a whole lose to cyber insurance to cyber insurance losses for ransomware year on year, right? So what is the total yearly cost of ransomware to the insurance industry? And this is my best guess, right? Every model is a guess. Every model is an opinion. You get things wrong. You have to make choices. And that's why I'm in front of you today. I like to be wrong in front of people for some weird reason. Because it gives me feedback is the real reason. And I want your feedback. I want you to come and tell me, like, I don't think this is right. I disagree. Your graph should look like this, and you can do a little bit better. But what I want to also get across is these two different ideas of reinsurance. There's quota share. Quota share is like, we'll take 40% of every loss you suffer. And so when we do that economic modeling for reinsurers, it looks like this, if they want to do quota share. But if they want to do excess of loss, which is where they say, we're only going to take everything above 800,000 on a limit of 1 or whatever, right? So those are two different types of reinsurance, and you have to model them differently. All right. Why do I care? I hear all of you silently saying. Cyber insurers are going to build these models. Countries are using these models. The history of catastrophe modeling is important. Like, you want to go to the UN and you want to talk about the effects of hurricanes on Jamaica as opposed to the effect of hurricanes on Switzerland. You need to have something to talk about. The risks need to be comparable, even though in some ways they're incomparable. But it's important to be able to have this dialogue and this discussion. So risk is a language, and models allow us the language to discuss this with insurers, right? It sets expectations. So how many ransomware incidents are you experiencing in your constituency is an expectation. Do you need more staff next year or less because we've all solved ransomware? Let's go home. It's done. Finished? No. I can dream. I hope it happens eventually. But expectations are important in how we communicate them. So stating opinions about risk, and the outcomes are in this format. We expect there are X events costing an average Y in country Z is a way of talking about it, right? So if these models are wrong, it's going to affect us, okay? The insurers are going to say, we think it costs this much, and the incident response community is going to go, that's a crazy number. Or, you know, that's a great number because we're all going to earn money, right? But these numbers matter. They impact how we spend money on risk. And so that's why I want all of you to be involved in this conversation. I want this to be more of a democratic kind of a discussion. Okay, so how might that work, right? Like I said, Cambridge is boring most of the time, and so I sit around and I do these crazy things. So I took all of the ransoms paid, and I divide them up by each ransomware gang, and I see which gangs are doing more of the making of money than the others, right? So an HHI index, as it's kind of casually known, is a measure of monopoly. So high on the graph is like, it's very much a monopoly. Low on the graph is very much not a monopoly. And you can do this every time you do a ransomware takedown, which I love. Anyone involved in takedowns? Thank you. You don't have to raise your hand. I want you to be anonymous, but thank you. I want more of this kind of thing. And the takedowns have an effect on the market of ransoms. Okay, so when it's high, there's one ransomware gang earning most of the money. And when it's low, there's a bunch of ransomware gangs earning a little bit of money and distributed. And so I think that we have to care about takedowns because they change that relationship. Whenever we take out one of the big gangs, we basically make a free market economy. And then we need to treat that differently than we do the rest of the time. All right, models can be baselines. So if the baseline in your country is, we think we're going to have 70 incidents this year and we think it's going to cost us this much money, that helps you say, did my interventions make a difference? Did I have an impact on my constituency? Did I do good work? Models can also justify budgets. You can say, like, according to this model, we believe that we're expecting this much economic damage to our constituency. And therefore, I need 3 incident responders focused on ransomware and not 1. And I like justifying budgets, right? I think it's good that you all get to do the work that you do and continue to do it. So models can also make policy. You want to talk about policy, you want to say, like, we need some ransomware policy across the globe, then these models can back up some of your assumptions, right? And I've built one. For those of you that are worried that this talk has no content, at the end, I'll show you where you can get access to the model that we have for free for at least a year. In fact, you can use it in perpetuity, but I won't update it without a little bit of money. But it's still free, and you can use it. Okay, so economics, what does it do? It makes all incidents comparable. I hated this when I first encountered it. Gordon Wu, amazing mathematician, brilliant man, very much on the spectrum, like many of us, and you know, he repeats things multiple times, and he kept repeating to me, you know, risk makes all disasters or catastrophes comparable. And I was like, cyber's incomparable. You can't do it. The math is different. Everything's special. I want to be a special child. I'm an only child, can you tell? You know, they have to be comparable. At the end of the day, when we go into the risk team and we say, here's cyber, it's more important than climate, it's more important than HR, it's more important than fire, it's more important, we're going to get ranked. Right? And what I hated was going into that room and they would go, how much could cyber cost me? And I would go, I don't know, like, you know, the math is very binary and you can't do it. And they would go, get the F out of my office, right? Everybody else on my team is mature and they can tell me that these incidents cost between this and they have a probability and you can't tell me any of this. Why are you here, right? So someone give that wolf a banana. So what drives the variance of ransomware loss? I've studied it a lot as part of the MSR SIG, as an academic, as a cyber insurer. I look at my claims. What are the 3 things that really drive the variance in the loss? Country, revenue, sector and industry, and quelle surprise, what's the 4th one? Anyone want to guess? Come on, you're awake. Time, seasonality, those are good. They drive a little bit of the variance. Threat actor. So the threat actor makes a huge difference. But guess what? We don't know who the threat actor is in advance, right? So even though it matters a lot, I can't model with it, and that's why I haven't put it on the graph. Okay. So here's the actual science in the presentation, or some of it. God, I've only got 10 minutes. I thought this talk was endless. Country effects frequency. There's a wonderful paper from the Belgian cybersecurity group talking about frequency. I've stolen their graph here because it's so good. I love it when science is so precise and on point. And they have very clearly identified that GDP affects your chance of ransom. So the graph on the left is a pie chart. I hate pie charts. You'll understand why, because I rant about everything. A huge proportion of that pie chart is the US. And that would lead you to believe that you don't have any ransomware risk if you look at that pie chart. And that's wrong. Every small country has some ransomware risk. It might have less than the US, but it still has risk. A 1 in 1,000 chance is still an impact on your country, and it comes in waves. So first thing we know, country affects your chance and your frequency. Sector also affects frequency, right? So this comes from the wonderful data of Lorenzo. He provides it to the MISP server. If you want to do these kind of statistics because you hate yourself like I do, then you can do pie charts like this, and they can make the eyes bleed. But seriously, this stuff matters, right? The statistics matter. And people get it wrong all the time. They say, the construction sector is being hammered more often than the others because it's a higher percentage. But you forgot something super important. How many companies out of all the companies are construction companies, right? Now I'm going to flip this away from the sector and I'm going to say revenue. I'm going to show you 2 pie charts that capture something super important. So usual counter-threat intelligence presentation is the graph on the left, the little Pac-Man, right? And they would say like, look, companies that are less than 100 million are absolutely getting hammered. But guess what? There are more of them. There are more companies under 100 million. You have to divide by the number of companies as well. And then you get the graph on the right. So the risk is actually higher in the large companies than it is in the small companies, even though more of them are getting hit. But that's happening because more of them are in the population. So next time you do these presentations and you talk about this stuff, normalize by the number of companies within that sector. Now, I'm going to try and combine these 2 things and work very quickly. You're now looking at a graph that is by sector and by country. So every dot is a country, and I've put the frequency into a log probability so that you can understand the risk in terms of normalized count against those number of organizations for each of those countries, right? It's a lot of computing power to produce such things. It's not particularly hard, but like we have to do so many countries, and then we have to do it for different revenue bands, and we have to divide by the number of countries in each of the, or number of companies in each of those countries in each of those revenue bands. So even just gathering this data makes my head hurt, but you get the idea, right? And the 3 highest risk countries are at the top of these graphs. But what I want you to really take away is that the risk is much lower if you're a small company. Now, what does that mean as a company grows? You don't have much cyber risk, you don't have much cyber risk, you don't have much cyber risk, suddenly you have a lot of it, right? It's hard to do cyber risk management as you grow. And when your revenue suddenly spikes, then you have a big problem. All right, modeling 101. How do I categorize all these different costs? I have the incident response costs. That's what most of you, pays your bills. That's fine. We also talk a lot about the extortion, the EXT cost. That's fine. We can talk about that. But that is not all of the cost. You also have digital asset recovery, and you have business interruption. Now, the model I have built only does the first 3, and I'm working on the last one for next release, okay? But business interruption is super hard. And why do we have trouble in ransomware incidents? Because most people can't estimate the business interruption costs. They know how much their business earns, they know what their downtime costs, but they don't know how long it's going to take to restore themselves. And so if we can give that information to them, and they can give the information to us about downtime costs, then we can start to have a discussion about how to do the risk management. My contention is that ransomware is primarily a risk management and decision-making problem. It's a crisis management problem. We love to make it an engineering problem, but I'm not sure it really is. So if you're building a model like this, you're left with a new problem, right? Going back here, if you don't pay the ransom, are any of these other costs higher? Some people say they are. I think actually when you pay the ransom, it usually makes incidents more expensive. And I've encoded that thinking in my model and backed it up with the science. So at the end of the day, I have to build a model for insurers, some of whom pay the ransom, some of whom do not. And I have to make some judgment over the proportion. You have to make statements with your model. So I said, look, I think 30% of people pay. I know there's one insurer that pays in 40% of cases. This isn't a moral judgment, it's just mathematical. So I have to encode this number and make a decision. If you want a model that has a different assumption, I can build it for you. So this is tunable in the model that I built, okay? We also do yearly updates, so as this changes, change things. All right. Have you quantified the effect of the controls, right? What is the value of a firewall? What is the value of the antivirus? What is the value of DMARC and SPF? I haven't encoded any of these things in the model because engineers have trouble telling me how much value it has. And I know, we all hate that, but like what is the impact reduction on a ransomware event of having some firewall rules? Anyone done the math? You got the answer? Yeah? Good call, good call. So, I had some pickle beer last night. That's probably why I'm hungover, but I like pickles, so I put them in the presentation. So, as engineers, we have a tendency to stay in our lane, and we don't get out of it, and we don't do risk, and that has a problem. Because if you can't quantify the effect of these controls, it's hard to justify the value of those controls, right? So, the basic conclusion here is that math is fun. Or maths, if you prefer. Everyone wanted to do maths, right? Should we just take out, we'll do a blackboard, we'll do some equations in the morning? No, okay, all right. Risk models are necessary. They exist. People are building them without you. I have this kind of attitude that nothing about us without us is important. And so I would like to see all of you engaged in the building of models. You can come to me and you can say the most expensive ransomware event I ever saw was this, and the smallest one I ever saw was that, and this is how it plays out, and we can encode that in the model, and your opinions can help make the model better. Maybe you don't like me. Maybe you think this guy is really annoying, and I want to build a model of my own. Please do. We need more models in the market. We need more opinions about how ransomware costs companies money or countries money. And we need to be able to back that up. And people can use the different models. And a model is basically like a debate, right? Like this is my view of the world. You bring your view of the world to the table. And we have a rich dialogue like we do at first. So I want lots more people helping build these models, whether it's with me or somebody else. Ransomware is a risk problem, not an engineering problem. That's my opinion. It's not to say engineering is not useful. It's very useful. There's a lot of things we can do to engineer the systems that we live with better so they are more resilient to ransomware. But at the end of the day, it's a risk problem. It turns out extortion predates the internet and Bitcoin. I know, it's like a real surprise, but extortion's been going on for thousands of years. And it takes different forms and it uses different mediums. And we're just dealing with the latest craze of using technology for extortion. So you can go on pretending your backups will save you if you want to. And you know, I spent 2 years in the ransomware SIG. We discussed backups eternally, I feel. And they do make a difference. They do genuinely make a difference. But I don't think it's the only problem. And I'll give you an example of why. Modern ransomware threatens you with a leak or an availability crisis. And in the leak situation, the backups don't really help you so much. And when you watch people having to deal with this crisis of like, should I pay the ransom or not? First of all, if we've let them do that, we've reached a real disastrous place. But they do. They sit there and they go, should I pay the ransom? Should they pay the ransom? And you try and remind them, they're leaking your data. Your backup didn't make any difference. You're just afraid of the impacts. Why did you store this data in the first place? You know, there's a long line of bad decisions that lead to this point. So models also make empowerment. I firmly believe that. Can I get access to this? Is it vaporware? No, it's not. You can go to this link. You can download a copy of the model. You will need the OASIS loss modeling framework to run it because it was designed to be part of an open source framework. The best thing you can do is write to me and license the model. Once again, it is free. You can use it in perpetuity. After a year, I'll make updates to the model, and I believe that you will want those updates. That has a cost if you want to continue to use it. But if you don't, that's fine too. So I'm releasing this. You can sign a license agreement. You can come and join me. And for those of you who are a little bit on the spectrum like me, you're probably annoyed that in slide 6 there wasn't a number 2. So I just want to remind you that it does exist. There is a number 2, and I'm putting it here for you so that you feel satisfied at the end of the presentation, instead of like me getting really frustrated. I had a friend who used to talk about the third pig in pen tests. You know, you always number 3 pigs, and you number them 1, 2, and 4, and you release them into the business, and they do stuff, and everyone runs around worrying about pig number 3, even though it doesn't exist. But that's how we roll as red teamers. So I think I have 10 seconds left, and I might take a few questions.
Thank you. Yes. There are microphones in the aisles. Please make your way to the microphones, and don't forget about the speaker survey, as they is an important part
I don't like
of our
being
statistics.
Scored. No, it's okay. Please.
So, great presentation. Love the humor. Love the math. On the GDP correlation to risk.
Yeah, to frequency
I
at
mean,
least.
that's sort of like, not to be overly simplistic, but if I was a criminal, I'd have to be pretty stupid to go rob a lemonade stand if there's a bank across the street from it.
Yeah.
And so
Are you going to make the quote, or will I? Like, why do you rob banks? Because that's where the money is?
Exactly. So
right.
I didn't want to just say that, but yes. It's good work, but it's telling us something that's intuitively obvious.
It should be, right?
So here's my question.
But keep in mind this is frequency, not necessarily severity. So one of the other questions we might ask is, does the U.S. pay more in ransoms than other countries?
So here's my question. There's a wide variance in this sort of, every year there's some report that comes out that talks about the global impact of cybercrime on global domestic product. And I'm wondering if you have comments on how these numbers are constructed, because they get thrown around a lot in the press, and decision makers are impacted, I feel.
I mean, famously, these estimates are terrible, not great, and we need to make them better. There's a couple great papers on cybercrime is often boring, and what's the other one about? Cybercrime estimates are often wrong or something. But there's a number of papers on the cybercrime economics and how different people estimate the impact of cybercrime to be wildly varying numbers. And I think that's okay in a sense of like debate and discussion, but eventually as a community we need to sort of converge these numbers and be more standardized in our metrics, back to your point, and the way that we count them. And the insurance industry will do that with or without you, and that's fine, but eventually they'll kind of come to these more realistic numbers, and then we can use them for policy. That kind of answer the question?
Thank you.
Yeah, all right.
Thank you very much. A great presentation. In your analysis, what was the most profound insight that you found in the data that was contrary to popular perception?
The risk is lower than people think it is. We spend a lot of money on ransomware defenses, and I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm really not saying that. But if you knew what the frequency of ransomware was and the cost of ransomware, you might not spend quite as much money on it. And certainly the security industry has a reason to hype this up. But actually the frequency is relatively low. It's also lower for SMEs than it is for big businesses. So again, very counterintuitive. People think that SMEs are like the most at risk. And if we're being really honest about risk, they have a much lower frequency. Now, that said, when a small business is hit by ransomware, it can be like a company destroying event. So like it doesn't happen as often to them. So maybe they're rational not to have spent quite so much money, but when it hits them, they can be completely destroyed. And to me, that's why we need computer emergency response teams at like a national or a sectoral level, and or insurance, right? As I said, insurance is not going to cover everything. And you can do insurance differently. You can have cooperatives. You don't have to do for-profit insurance. So, but the point is, we're doing a risk treatment, and we need to think of it as a risk, and we need to talk about these numbers. And that's why in the MSR SIG, we put a real focus on like, how do we know how much ransomware is happening and how much does it cost? And we don't have perfect visibility, but we're trying. And we're trying at a global level, right?
Thank you.
Cheers.
I do have a question as well. So do you have any experience how much are we missing? Since if there is a defense that works against ransomware, that will never end up in an incident report. So we're actually lacking the data of how many attacks did we prevent?
Right. We need some near miss data alongside our controls. So like we need to know that these organizations use these controls and they almost had a ransomware incident, assuming they can track it in some way, right? Like surprisingly, a lot of ransomware incidents are actually zero cost. We forget that. But if antivirus is doing its job, or intrusion detection, it catches the deployment of some ransomware and it doesn't really cost us anything, right? Like maybe a little bit of company time, but like it didn't get deployed and we stopped it and it's a zero cost incident. And so like, to your point, I don't know how many zero cost incidents are happening out there in the security industry. And if we could quantify that, then we could justify the expense that we spend on such things, which goes back to our point about how do we gather incident data. And maybe First and other organizations need to gather incident data, not just on ransomware, but on any kinds of incidents, so we can talk about such things.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question. Sorry, if I may.
So we're at time. So I would suggest you ask your question. And
I'll take it
after
outside
the-
if I don't want to prejudice the next speaker. So I'll take your question out there.
Let's
What's lunch?
thank our speaker again.
I mean, I'll take one more question if it's lunch, right? Yeah.